Hello, welcome to the LaunchLeft podcast. I'm Rain Phoenix, and today's very special guest is HURRAY, the RIFF RAFF. Don't forget to rate and subscribe. Follow us on all socials at LaunchLeft. Please welcome her to the show. Hello, Alynda, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Can I gush for just a second about your record?
That would feel great because I've been living in a bubble for 2 years. So I'll take it.
HURRAY, the RIFF RAFF is a very singular artist because somehow you've managed to pull all these, some of my favorite people like Kate Bush and also like Leonard Cohen. And then, it's just a wide range of people, but you don't sound like them, but I just feel their blessing in the album somehow.
Wow, that's a beautiful way to put it. Thank you.
What first brought you to music? I know you had, at 17, left New York and ended up in New Orleans where you live now, and sounded rather romantic, boxcar hopping all the way there. I'm sure that was great fodder and inspiration, but did you always know, and during that time, were you playing music? Did you always know music was going to be your creative outlet?
Well, when I was a kid, I loved music. That's like what I turned to as a weird little kid who felt like I was born in the wrong time. And then when I found punk rock, that's when I realized I was born in exactly the right time. But when I left home, I didn't really play music. I was I wrote poetry, and I knew that I didn't think I could handle having a real job, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. My biggest inspiration or idea was, maybe I'll become a squatter and I'll learn how to do electric work. That was my big goal. But it was when I ran away and when I got to New Orleans was when I started to play music on the street because I needed to make money. And I met other street kids there who were playing acoustic instruments. We were learning old, folk songs from all over the world. And then once again, I was kind of living in this other time, my first instrument was the washboard because that's all I knew how to do. I was like, I can keep a rhythm and I'll play with these shells that I found on the ground. But it was through that kind of wolf pack of kids that I started to write and sing. And I just had this amazing community behind me.
And you all formed bands together, or was it more just kind of to start busking or panhandling and then coming together to share the rewards and have dinner?
Yeah, it was, we would busk primarily. And that was a really great way to just keep myself out of trouble, really, my drug was playing music. I just wanted to play music all day long. And I was constantly learning. And I was surrounded by people of all different skill levels too. Some of these kids learned how to play classical piano, So it was this really amazing little bubble of community. And, then eventually I started feeling I have songs I want to write. And then it turned into real shows, at not just on the street. And New Orleans is great in that way that everybody sits in with each other and everybody, forms a ton of different bands. But it was different for me to go on the road as HURRAY for the RIFF RAFF. Then I kind of, isolated myself a bit from this very New Orleans centric world here. And I just tried to tour as much as possible across the US until today,
What made you stop in New Orleans, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, there was this was before cell phones, really. I didn't have one. And then definitely before the internet was the way it is now, social media for sure. And there were just word of mouth in the punk scene, especially the traveling scene, about what cities were good for traveling kids, what places were, friendly, or where'd you have to really look out for the cops, places like that. And everybody talked about New Orleans because, for lack of a better reason, everyone was like, you can drink outside there. Like one reason that you won't get messed with by the cops. But I was just drawn to the romance of what people talked about. And it was just this mythical place. And a friend of mine was like, hey, we're driving down there, get in the van if you want to come. And I still remember that van ride. And I remember I was with these metalheads and they were listening to Iron Maiden the whole time. And I remember like
awesome.
Getting out and just like the feeling of the air and being like, this is a magical place.
I imagine you have, and maybe you don't, a few ghost stories, but I grew up some in the South and I have some ghost stories. So.
Oh, yeah. What part of the South did you grow up in?
So I grew up in Gainesville, Florida, but there are some outlying, like Cross Creek and Micanopy. There's all these little towns that you can go to from there that are really almost frozen in time.
Wow.
And yeah, I had more than my share of interesting stories. I'm sure you did too. Something about when I went to New Orleans, anytime I've been there, I feel that. Like when I arrive, I'm like, wow, I can feel the spirits are kind of cranking there.
Yeah. And they really demand respect.
Yeah.
It's very, I mean, if there's one thing I learned a lot from traveling as like a young kid was to really rely on my intuition. And coming to New Orleans, I learned a lot about intuition and a lot about respecting the ghosts and humbling myself. And, you witness a lot of people coming here and kind of getting like overtaken almost, like just people going down spirals that feel a little bit more metaphysical than just about addiction or something. And I learned to really respect the dead here and to honor them, and especially with music,
Knowing that you're traveled a lot and that you kind of like to keep moving, do you still feel like New Orleans is your spot? Like, you don't have any urge to go move somewhere else right now? This is where you've put down roots, so to speak?
This is definitely my home. I will say that the hurricanes are really hard to withstand for my nervous system. It's really scary. This last one that we had in September was just brutal. And the whole city lost electricity for almost an entire month. That's what we were being told when we left. But it ended up being like 2 weeks. So that's really the only reason why I would leave. It starts to feel a little bit like it fed so much into the album. Like, well, the apocalypse is here in a way. So where do I want to spend my apocalypse? It gets a little, it gets a little scary in that way, but I love it here for sure. I worked with Brad Cook out in Durham, North Carolina, and I love it there. And I love Brad. He was definitely, I kind of see him as like a spirit guide. I really needed his energy to get me through the journey of making this album. I felt very vulnerable and I am very sensitive to energy, so when I met him, I just knew that it was right.
Wow. And that, again, in the South, another amazing state, North Carolina. I love
it.
I know, me
and
too.
The Triangle's so cool. There's a lot of amazing artists coming out of North Carolina right now, and a lot of amazing just like community happening.
Yeah, for sure. Your record has so many different beats in terms of, feelings, and it is almost like traveling the United States. Every state is different, like each song has a sort of story unto itself and is governed by its own energetic frequency to me.
It was. And it's funny you say that because Brad really helped me. I was like, when you're so in it, you're like, I need somebody outside of my mind and my consciousness to look at this and just give me a different viewpoint. And it was Brad who was like, Saga has to end it. And I never thought of that because, you know, we're kind of told these like rules about like, oh, hit them with the like singles in the front and stuff like that. And this idea of a song like Saga ending it, I always wanted to open it with Wolves, because Wolves is like this kind of call to action, like a warning. But it felt so good it felt like we really like, you know, hit an arc. Like we finished the story when ending with a song like Saga that's about moving on and healing as best as you can from trauma and starting a new chapter in your life and identifying as something other than a victim or even a survivor. For me, it was about identifying as like an adventurer, you know? But yeah, it was a little, I had to really step out of myself to hear it. And when I heard that sequence, it all just made sense.
Well, yeah. And especially thinking about how to sort of finish the project with that song, with the way you described it now, is such a great way to start whatever comes next. It's like
exactly.
it opens the road to anything. You could decide to make a classical record, and that song was you know what I mean? That song was the perfect, like, here we go, adventure, let's start anew. And that's really cool.
Yeah, because I don't know if you experienced this, but, you know, of course, when I'm done with a project, I feel a little bit of fear of like, will I ever write another song? Mm-hmm. You know, like, oh God, I finished that. Will I be able to do this again? So that was also a way of me being like, no, there's so much more to come, you know. One of my favorites on the record is Night Queen, because I feel like that's one of those songs that like just brings you to this underworld real quick. And it has a quote from one of my favorite poets, Ocean Vuong. It's an interview that he did on a podcast called On Being that I just listened to like nonstop on my long walks in lockdown. And it just feels like this really nice little moment where we get to go into the underworld and hang out in kind of a different reality before we come back up.
I wanted to touch on something that I noticed was in your bio that I too have done, which is EMDR, a trauma therapy, because I think it's become much more mainstream, or that it's a modality that people have used a lot more than when I first came across it. I would say in the early aughts, it was very rare. And, but I did like an intensive of it, and it was so incredibly helpful. You know, around my brother's death, and you know, but it is so isn't it a wild experience to be like, what do you mean I'm hearing two separate sounds and holding vibrating nodes in my hand? It was totally. But then you would leave going, oh wow, okay, and then you have to be so delicate with yourself because everything was potentially upsetting, right? You could get really sensitive. Did you have that experience?
Yeah, definitely going home and getting as cozy as possible. You know, I mean, I have had some really amazing experiences of just like witnessing, and it would be kind of a memory. We'd start with a memory that wasn't even like, you know, the worst of the worst. It would be something pretty, you know, that hurt me, but that we could work through, that wouldn't really overwhelm my system. And I would go on a journey in my mind where all of a sudden I'm standing up for myself as a kid, you know, like my mind just kind of traveling through time and going through these healing roads that I couldn't have even like made up if I wanted to. It would just start happening. And, you know, I'm really open to healing, and I can be a little bit woo-woo myself, but I also have this like New York cynical, like, I don't know, I've been doing therapy for a long time. Like, I don't know if you're going to help me, you know? And it's been the thing that connected my body to my mind, to the intellectual healing that I've been trying to do for years in talk therapy, being like, oh yeah, no, I got my trauma on lock. I can explain it to you real quick and easy, you know, but my body was just so ramped up. And, you know, I'm still on my journey with that, but this was the thing that connected my body and my brain to be like, hey, we're not under threat right now. You can relax for a second. And I had no idea for how long I've been living in this like state of just total panic, like an animal ready to run for my life, you know?
Yeah.
And it was because of lockdown that I finally saw that so clearly, when I didn't have that ability to get on a plane or get in the van or just busy myself. I was like, why do I feel like a shark is going to come after, you know, like just in total panic. So I'm so grateful to have found it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wanted to bring it up just so that our listeners who maybe don't know about it can know that they could explore that. And I'm pretty sure now even, you know, insurance covers it. And
yeah,
it's known. It's a known therapeutic that now is not so woo-woo or out there, and it's been proven time and time again to help. So I just wanted to bring that up, and in case it could help others, you know.
There's a great book called The Body Keeps the Score that, you know, really explains it for all the science nerds out there that want to read about it.
I know that you were kind enough to bring to us a new artist, Amelia Jackie.
Amelia is why I write songs. Amelia,
wow.
For sure. I met Amelia when I was 17 on the road, and she just completely changed my life. I mean, she was writing songs and traveling with her guitar. And I just remember being like, I have never met somebody so cool in my life, you know, and her songs were so infused with these ideas of feminism and queerness, and it just like was a revolution in my mind for me, you know? So I'm so happy to share her music, and she's going to be playing some shows with me on this next tour I'm doing too. And we're all going through this weird world together, you know, and we're all, even the people that are doing like the greatest at some things are feeling so insecure. And, you know, it's really so important, because I think we can feel as artists really lonely. I mean, I know I felt very lonely throughout this pandemic. But Amelia is one of those people that I call up when I'm like, is this a good idea? Does this make sense? How does this lyric sound to you? You know?
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Until you've done it as an artist or been the kind of artist that breaks that mold of what that competition thing that is just innate because it's a societal habit. It's not true, though. It's not who we are. And you choose to do something like, I'm lonely or I feel this way, and instead I'm going to offer something to someone else, and you receive what that feels like. Once you know that, you kind of are just one of those artists that'll keep doing that, because you realize, oh, it's all a circle. It's a circle of giving.
Totally. Yeah, I definitely feel like, you know, my first instrument besides the washboard was the banjo. And it was given to me by a New Orleans musician who was like, hey, this is a banjo that never stays in tune, and I got a new one. Somebody told me you want to learn this, so here you go. And that completely changed my life, you know, just somebody taking a chance. So
yeah,
I definitely appreciate what you're doing here.
Thank you so much for making such a timely record. It is called Life on Earth, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's it.
Woo! I did it.
Yeah, you got that.
And would you mind if we bring in Amelia? Yes. Would you mind if we bring in Amelia? Amelia Jackie, that's you.
Hi. Just listening to your song, Time is the Killer.
Oh, cool.
I loved it. It's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It's really moving, yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. I just listened to your song and was like, what? So cool. I was just sharing with Alynda. I was like, whoa, I love that you brought her to our attention. And now we know about you. Now we're going to be spinning you all the time over here at Club LaunchLeft. Thank you so much for being on the show. And what is your first memory of meeting Alynda?
I had seen Alynda perform in her band, which was Hot Dog Is My Hero.
Wow.
Which I think she was 15, and it was at C Squat. And I was up like in the rafters, and I was just like, whoa, this is insane. And then, so I was already a little obsessed. And then,
wow.
I remember we were at a kitchen table at Casa del Sol, which was a big squat in the South Bronx. And it was also like an organizing center because the RNC was being hosted that year in New York City. Yeah. So that's when we met.
Wow.
Do you remember that?
No, but I remember nothing. I remember...
Me neither.
I remember us all hanging out on a construction site and you playing the guitar at one point. It was a building that was being worked on. And I remember you playing a song and that being a really mind-blowing moment for me.
That was across from the Village Voice. It was a new building. So you can go there and see it's this insane skyscraper. And we would climb to the top of the building and sleep on the roof. And yeah, we would play music up there. But so I always walked by that building because I could remember I would be like, there's the Village Voice. Like, we made it.
And I heard you're going to be going on the road together for a couple of dates. Is that exciting to play on the same bill?
It's so exciting. Yeah. I think speaking to your question about why music, like I think I was a really kind of self-assured child. And then it kind of went backwards for me in a way. Like I definitely thought I was great before I was. And I know I had like a burning passion, and I remember like sharing with my sisters when I was really young. I like sat them down on the bed and I was like, I have to tell you guys something. And I was probably like 7. And they were like, okay, what is it? Like really nervous? Like what is this child going to share with us? And I was like, I'm going to be a singer. And they died. They were like, okay. Yeah, but yeah, I think in some ways like I knew. And then in other ways I was kind of a late bloomer. I'm just kind of coming to terms with that this year, actually. And that I have like a deep resistance to the industry in general, the music industry, and I think that has kept me from, pursuing. Like I just realized when Alynda invited me to come on this tour, like we've played many shows together, but I don't think I've ever really been on a big stage, and I was like, okay, this is cool. I haven't been on there yet, but I'm like, it occurred to me I didn't really exactly have that dream, or I haven't since I was really young,
One thing I forgot to ask you, Alynda, was about the song Precious Cargo, I think it's called.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Well, I just there was something, I was moved by the fact that it's very hard, I think, for artists to write about things to write about activism. This is a shorthand. You know what I mean? Like I find it really cheesy often when people are trying to like tell you what they believe in.
Totally.
Like I can't. I'm always like, no, that's not what I mean by art and activism. I mean David Lynch when I mean art and activism. Do you know what I mean? He's all about awakening and TM, but then he makes the darkest art. So, and your song "Precious Cargo" is a perfect example of that, of the ability to tell a story that is really spot on, talking very specifically about ice, ICE.
Yeah.
And yet it's not, it doesn't feel like a protest song or in a way that would be cheesy. It's like an absolutely alternative album track that is saying something. And that is so hard, I think, to do. And there are a few artists that do it.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about joy lately, about how do we experience it? How do we allow it into our bodies? And, with a song like Precious Cargo, I've thought so much about being a witness. I feel like that's been a lot of my journey as a songwriter, is witnessing so much suffering or witnessing injustice. And this feeling of what do I do with what I'm seeing right before my eyes, and how do I somehow share it with people, and I think I kind of let go of this idea that I could convince people to care. I think I had that on my last album. I thought I could convince them if I just said it well enough. And with a song like Precious Cargo, I decided it was more about just sharing a story, sharing the stories that men in these detention centers told me, that they wanted the world to hear it, and I want the world to hear it. And that's also, just as good. It's like, it's for me, I've met a lot of like humbling lately, just being like, I'm just going to make the work that I make. And I hope it helps somebody somehow.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, that's really what this space serves as, is a space to share stories in an intentional way. We never know how it can help others. Like, we can assume we're just sharing something, and it's in a vacuum, or no one's gonna, but for all you know, it changed the course of someone's life.
That's what happened with me and Amelia. I met Amelia and heard her writing songs about her life, and she's lived such a different experience than me and grew up in the South, and just like, it was a totally different way of growing up, but she had these images in her songs that just stuck with me so much. It's like, sometimes you just share your own story and it's so particular, but yet like there's this shared something in there that people just, it changed the course of my life. It made me feel like I wasn't crazy, or I wasn't alone. And it got me addicted to writing songs. So that's cool.
Oh, thanks so much for your time. What a joy to spend it with you.
Well, this is Alynda Segarra of Hurray for the Riff Raff, and I'm introducing Amelia Jackie and her song All Around Town.
Your big black car, it drags me all around town. Kiss all the pretty boys and throw your money down. When the money's all gone, you're still high as coal. And I know you'd rather lose than fall. Tell me what to do with you. Anything you want me to. And yes, I do. You were born in the middle of a hot night in July, and your mama couldn't tell if you were laughing or crying. storm blew in right off the Gulf. So you never did learn when enough was enough. Tell me what to do with you. Anything you want me to. And yes, I do. So I sing you a song of your favorite night bird, and I buy you the things that you don't deserve. 'Cause heartache, heartache, heartache is old, and it grows in my chest like a black, black mold. Tell me what to do with you. Anything you want me to. And yes, I do.
LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.